The Trump assassination cover-up has begun. Can they get away with it? I don't think so. Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Chris Martenson back with you. We're doing daily coverage again, just like I did during COVID. It's the same thing. We have a fast-breaking environment. I'm going to help you stay on top of it and make sense of it. So let's start here. I think we're seeing the beginnings of a cover-up, or could it be a cleanup? I can't believe that. I mean, this is so silly that I have to laugh. I mean, the Babylon Bee, I don't think could even keep up with what we're seeing these days. Literally, the FBI is hosing down the spot where the shooter was, the alleged shooter, I'm going to now say, because I don't have any confirmation that the rifle was fired or that there was brass around it or any of the normal things that you would normally have or see. So without that, but still, they're cleaning up the spot. So I don't know, like when they were shooting at him, how many shots were fired? We don't have any basic accounting. How many shots were fired? Was it 8? Was it 9? Was just one of them from return fire from the snipers back at this position? Were there more than one shot? We won't know because they've hosed it down. Of course, that's one of the first things you do when you're in law enforcement. You have to clean up the crimes. Oh, no, actually, you're on your own. In fact, there are services like aftermath services because, who cleans up crime scenes after murder scenes? Well, law enforcement officials and crime scene investigators do not have the knowledge or supplies needed to safely sanitize a crime scene. So they walk off if you got blood all over your floor and they say, good luck with that. Unless the FBI comes, in which case they're going to bring a hose. Right. Carrying on. And since when does the FBI actually do, say, construction work? Here's in the aftermath of the Roadhouse shooting Roadhouse 91 shooting in Las Vegas, and this comes from John Cullen. Look at the FBI. They're actually tarring over and painting over all the bullet holes that were out there in the tarmac. Instead of calculating trajectories. Really? So the FBI does, in addition to crime scene investigations, they also do construction work and they hose things down. If you're believing this stuff, this is hard to take. All right. So here's where the cover-up starts. The Hill, of course, is busy there doing deep state cover-up work. And here they are trying to, as best they can, cover up this entire situation right now. So let's see how they're doing it. Because in their cover-ups, by their cover-ups, shall ye know them. This is really important. I like to see what they're doing and how they go about it. So this is Ellen Mitchell writing here on 7/17. That happens to be today. She wrote here amid swirling questions about how the Secret Service allowed a gunman, so many swirly questions, close with an AR-style rifle to get close enough to shoot and injure former President Trump and murder one person and critically injure at least 2 others that we know about. Some answers are starting to emerge. The security gap. Here it is. They're going with the old security gap. That's what it was. It was a security gap. Like, we had a bomber gap and there was the Gulf of Tonkin incident. And then there was, on and on, right? This is the cover up. So you can at least know the angles they're going to try and pursue. It's a security gap. And so we're going to see in the rest of the article, they work very hard to sort of reinforce that idea. It's a security gap. That's what it was. Nothing more troubling than that. A security gap, right? This would be like if you went to a new car lot and you saw that there was a car there that didn't have an engine, tires, or a windshield, and they tried to sell it to you, explaining that there was just a manufacturing gap. It's the most ludicrous thing ever. All right. The security gap, quote, appears to stem from how and what the agency communicated with local law enforcement. Oh, it's just communication errors. This happened. You're in a relationship and you meant to say, please pass the salt, honey, but instead you said something else, as the old joke goes, right? Okay. And the apparent decision not to place security personnel on the building the gunman climbed up and shot from. So here's the thing, The Hill, Ellen. That's the apparent decision. You know what the next thing in this article should be is like, who made that apparent decision? That would be the next logical thing to do. Do they do that? Not on your life. Carrying on, she writes here, members of the Secret Service's counter sniper team and counter assault team were at the rally and placed on rooftops immediately in the vicinity of the stage, but Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheadle, well named too, by the way, told ABC News that no agent had been placed on the roof of the building of the shooter climbed on because it had a sloped roof. It was an OSHA thing. We were just trying, would you believe we were thinking of sniper safety? No? Quote, from Kimberly Cheadle, she said, quote, and I'm quoting, quote, that building in particular has a sloped roof at its highest point, as we covered yesterday. And so there's a safety factor that would be considered there, and that we wouldn't want to put somebody up on a sloped roof. So, the decision was made to secure the building from the inside. Who made the decision? We need to know who made the decision. Because, well, let me get to this, because this is really bizarre. And I'll carry on with that. We'll get back to that. That's such an important point. However, Dan Crenshaw, there you can see him down there, who I think that's the nickname that Tucker Carlson gave him, which is absolutely spot on. I love that nickname. Quote, carrying on from Ellen, she says here, and several former top secret service agents told the AP that the agency must find out how crooks even gained access to the roof. Indeed, they do. Suggesting there may have been a flaw in the event security plan. Suggesting. It is suggestive that there may have been a flaw. Suggestive that there may have been a flaw. Suggesting there may have been a flaw. It is suggestive. This is just beyond. This is okay, Ellen. In terms of providing cover-up article writing for the deep state, and I know you think this is going to help your career out. Maybe it will. I don't know. It's the odds are on your side unless the political winds have changed. In which case, this could be actually no bueno for you, Ellen. But at any rate, I think you could use a little help. You need a little tighten that up, because we can't. That's a little too far to suggest there may have been a security flaw when a guy who's 20 years old walks up, comes through, is spotted by police, bystanders, Secret Service. He's got a scope, a range-finding scope. He somehow manages to walk all the way from his car with a ladder in one arm and a rifle in the other and a backpack, and somehow walks all the way up and gets on the roof. That is suggestive that there may have been a security flaw. Good writing. We're going to tighten that up in the future, Ellen. Carrying on, quote, Representative Dan Crenshaw, this POS down here, former Navy SEAL, cautioned against jumping to conclusions. Quote, I've spoken with law enforcement. I've spoken with the Secret Service areas. I've spoken with them. I've spoken with law enforcement, says Dan. By the way, Texas, you got to get this guy out. This guy is totally not on the side of we the people. Okay. He's just a grifter. He just wants to be close to power. He just absolutely will do anything, say anything. Like if you needed to cast a character in a House of Cards remake, here's your next baddie. Okay. It's this guy, right? This is Francis Underwood down here. Totally. Okay, I've spoken with law enforcement. I've spoken with the Secret Service. I've gotten a better understanding of what actually happened, he said in a video posted to social media. Now, no excuse is being made here, but, this is a security failure. Oh, there it is. It's a gap. It's a security failure. It's just a gap. Bomber gap, security gap, little gap. We got a gappity gap. That's all. Security failure. Anytime a president gets shot, he says, helpfully, it's a security failure. Oh, no way, Captain Obvious. Thank you. But then we have to assess whose fault it was. Okay, there's one other possibility, is that it wasn't a fault, right? Sometimes we say, oh, you know what? It was just an accident that the bank got robbed. We'll have to assess whose fault it was. No, it would pretty much, sometimes when a crime has been committed, it's not a failure. It's an intentional thing. So you can see here, Dan's working hard to try and paint this whole thing as some sort of accident or something unintentional, which is a possibility, okay? But again, we're going to be taking a position because of the way the evidence currently stacks up, because of all the evidence we have, that this now has to be treated, obviously, by anybody with a modicum of common sense, that this was an intentional, somebody let it happen, this was enabled. And the only way we can get to this idea, this other conspiracy theory that it was just a conspiracy of failure, is if the evidence really stacks up that way. But for now, we have to leave open, in good differential, we're detectives on a CSI scene, sort of an investigation, we have to leave open all the possibilities, right? Like, if Dan's a detective, he walks into a guy's living room and there's the guy's wife dead on the ground, beaten to death. And he's like, well, most obviously we should consider that she slipped and fell, right? That would be something. But Dan, you would want to keep a more broad view if you had an interest in finding out the truth, which we do, of course. Carrying on, Ellen's writing here, quote, reports indicate Crooks was spotted observing the building by local law enforcement who alerted others. Which others? Who was alerted precisely? What did they say? We're going to need to hear that. That he was walking back toward the back of the building with a backpack. Well, okay. Where's the ladder? Where's the gun? Questions, Ellen. Questions. Okay. One officer was even reportedly hoisted up to the top of the building, but Crooks pointed his gun at them and they dropped back down. End of story. I mean, that's like, and then what happened? That would be, and then what happened? The officer drops back down, and then what? Did they not tell one of these dudes down here, all kitted up? Was it, let's just pretend it's that officer in the black standing, over to your left as you're looking at this. Let's pretend that guy, he doesn't even have that rifle, which he's holding there with appropriate finger discipline on the trigger, off the trigger, I mean. So let's pretend all he had was his sidearm. He looks up. He's like, oh, wow, dude with a rifle. Okay, well, Tom, my good friend, the former police sergeant says, well, if that's the case and you don't feel like taking him on with your pistol, that's when you call a real policeman, which would be one of these other two people here from the Beaver County Emergency Services Unit. These are the ESU guys. They train hard, by the way. Carrying on, quote, Crenshaw said their failure, the local police's, their failure to actually confront the shooter was a problem, but it was important. Here he is explaining, providing cover. But it was important to keep in mind that the officers, hey, they weren't Secret Service agents or trained military specialists. And it was likely the first time they've ever had to do security of this manner for such a large event, end quote. Okay, hey, Dan, go to the Emergency Services Unit, Beaver County's Emergency Service Unit webpage, and you can see they got really good, cool videos. These guys trained up. They trained up pretty good. I was watching videos where they're walking down range in a tight formation, live fire, there's smoke bombs going off. Like, these guys trained up. They trained up pretty good. And by the way, based on how these guys are standing and their demeanor, I'm going to guess that these aren't just some dudes who decided to kit it up at the local emergency services unit. Perhaps these gentlemen here even have military experience, but even if they didn't, they still trained up for an event just exactly like this. So here they're trying to say, oh yeah, Dan's like, oh, you got to keep in mind, they probably weren't ready for an event like this. No, Dan, they trained exactly for an event like this over and over again. So let's just dispense with that. So that's BS, just full on BS. Carrying on. Ellen continues writing, many have also pointed out the fact that attendees in the crowd noticed the gunman. So you got to go with that obvious objection. Let's go with it. Nearly 2 minutes before the shots were fired, according to witness videos from the event. So these are going to be kind of hard to push in the background. If it was just witnesses saying that, they'd already be dismissed or in a locked trunk in a river. But we have the videos, so thankfully we do. Okay, quote, due to the time lapse, a popular conspiracy alleges the counter snipers purposely didn't take the shot when the shooter was spotted. Oh, but Crenshaw said agents are meant to exert control in an evolving situation where things aren't clear. You're a counter sniper at a Trump rally. There's people everywhere. It's loud. Supporters are very excited. They will climb on top of whatever they can climb on top of to see Trump, he said. Here he is providing cover for why the snipers, clear line of sight with minutes to go, seeing this guy again through a Night Force 7x35 scope, which means that at most, if they had that on full power, they were looking at this guy on the roof with his weapon as clearly as if he was only a few yards in front of them with the same optical clarity. Clear day, all that, right? Now, one of the sniper teams may have had a tree in the way. I think that's the case. But there's at least another one on the other team on the back roof. They probably had a clear line of sight. Okay. All right. Plus they had warnings, plus. Okay. What's more, he carries on here, if Secret Service agents believed the building had been secured by local law enforcement, they may have thought the shooter was a SWAT officer. Well, they might have, but you know what SWAT officers do in situations like this? Talk to anybody, Dan. The SEAL team talks to local law enforcement experts, is they wear identifying gear, okay? There's not a chance in the world a local SWAT guy is going to be up there in a Demolition Ranch t-shirt and no helmet and no identifying stuff with a rifle. There's just zero chance of that, because one of the things you're aware of when there's people around there who have high-powered rifles looking for threats, you want to make pretty clear that you are not a threat. That's pretty standard fare. It says police on here. You've got your helmet and badges, whatever it is. The idea that like, oh yeah, they were confused because, you know, sometimes SWAT could have been SWAT, could have been SWAT with the long hair, the glasses, the AR rifle without an optic on it, and the Demolition Ranch t-shirt. Could have been. Please. That's what I get annoyed with people like Eyepatch McCain here, is because they assume that you and I are complete morons, and they just talk as if they're confident in how stupid we are. Now, what they are confident in is how stupid the journalists are, because the journalists are actual dummies, and they're never going to ask a follow-up question because they've been conditioned by years and years that they're stenographers. Oh, is that so? Let me write down what you said. That's amazing, Dan. How about a follow-up question, right? Finally, quote, you don't exactly know what you're looking at, and the consequences of making a mistake by shooting a civilian are enormous. They're absolutely enormous, Dan Eyepatch McCain says. Now, of course, the consequences of Trump getting shot are even more enormous, but you should at least have some context in your head before you start pointing fingers. Yeah, context. What if these guys had shot an innocent person? That's what they're really worried about here. It's like, yeah, but, you know, innocent people don't have a rifle pointed at the president, ever. Okay, it's just not how that works. So this is cover up, but it's poor, and this just speaks to the quality of the material that they have to work with when they're trying to cover this up. Now, they have a lot of problems because, as we've been painting out and hopefully capturing in real time, so that none of this gets lost down the memory hole, that there are just gaping gaps in this whole story. They're really bad. Okay. And by the way, this is what I do. If you want to hear more of this, if you haven't somehow had enough of my voice, there's going to be another part to this, which happens back at Peak Prosperity. That's where I go a little bit further out of the limb, things that aren't quite as rock solid, as well as additional information, but also the impacts of all of this. Folks, this is really big deal. This is going to have huge impacts. It's going to impact the markets. It's going to impact all kinds of things. Please, if you don't become a subscriber at Peak Prosperity, and I'd like you to, because, well, we'd love to have you there, and it supports journalism like this, if we can call it that, but because I want you to be safe. So if you don't come over, it's fine, but plant the garden, okay? Trust me on this one. You're gonna be glad you did in about a year. All right, carrying on. So which was it? Well, here's the ever-evolving storyline. And again, they're working with really weak clay. I mean, that they have some bad substance to try and fashion a coverative narrative out of this. So storyline number one, which we got on July 15th, was not us. Local police were responsible, right? Cheadle, who really ought to be arrested by now, as far as I'm concerned. Cheadle also said that local authorities were tasked with securing the building. So that's what she said. Now, she's trying to walk that back today, but this is what they went with first. Local authorities were tasked with securing the building. Remember, on a couple days ago, I showed, I forget who it was, but it was a great comment on Twitter, which was, Secret Service did all they could with the Pac-Man security perimeter. They had this little Pac-Man where the building was. Weird that they just passed that off, apparently without setting up communications protocols or talking about it or even assuring that. Anyways, it didn't happen that way. Okay. Full stop. Didn't happen that way. But anyway, that's what they went with first. Cheadle said local authorities were tasked with securing the building. It was them. They were tasked with that. In this particular instance, quote, she said, we did share support for that particular site, which means the fairgrounds. That's why I've highlighted it in pinkish color there. We did share support for that particular site, and that the Secret Service was responsible for the inner perimeter, she said. Okay, and then they got assistance from local counterparts for the outer perimeter. So somehow 140 yards is outer perimeter, which really isn't everybody's a trained sniper will tell you not only was that building not outer perimeter, but so shouldn't have the water tower have been, right? That would have been a great place. Nobody's talking about that still out there in the media, or Dan Eyepatch McCain, Crenshaw isn't trying to figure out how to include that in there because nobody can account for that. It is the most obvious, logical place to have at least a spotter team, but preferentially a spotter sniper team. That's where you would place them. Full stop. No question about it. Why would you put two teams right near Trump? One on one building behind him, one on another building behind him. Teams. Why not put one of those teams in a second spot where you can actually see things? That would have been pretty amazing, right? Obviously, that would have completely foiled this entire plot. So, again, back to the most important question. Who was making these decisions? Who? Okay, but first, this is storyline number one. Not us. Local police were responsible. By the way, as I tried to research this, so ABC News had a really good interview on this, and it turns out that this got taken down off of Facebook. So just as a quick reminder, I know you already know this, Facebook continues to be an enemy of the truth and therefore America. And they provided horrifyingly bad, overt censorship around all things COVID related, vaccines, you name it. And now they're trying to cover up on this whole thing too, you know, for your own good, citizen, right? Anyway, screw Facebook, full stop. So, but then on July 16th, a day later, and most preposterously, Kim Cheadle said that we didn't put snipers on the roof because it was kind of sloped, right? And I showed you that slope was a 1.15 to 12. It's like a 1 to 12, like almost flat, right? The roof was too slopey, right? Not even the bee can really keep up with this level of sarcasm and humor. But just for kicks, you know, this came up earlier today. Somebody said, well, not too slopey for a cow. And that's more like a 312 pitch. Just guessing. Right? Just got to have some fun with this. Oh my God, here's a Hereford hanging out on what looks to me like a 10-12 pitch, right? Making it work out. I know Herefords, okay? Beef cows, they're not the most agile, and they're managing a 10-12 pitch. Come on. So it was too slopey. It's just the most preposterously stupid, inane, obviously treating you like you're a complete garbage moron for even attempting to float it was a safety issue. Would you believe safety? No, we wouldn't, Kim. We wouldn't. And here's some more lying that just came out recently. It says here, the shooting incident shatters Trump's teleprompter on July 13th during a rally in Pennsylvania. A shooting incident occurred, right? Where a bullet hit a teleprompter near former President Donald Trump, causing glass shards to graze his ear. In green, underlined, law enforcement confirmed that Trump was not directly hit by a bullet, but was injured by the glass from the shattered teleprompter. What do you mean law enforcement? Who exactly is saying this? Okay, right? And by the way, Pittsburgh Courier ran with this. By the way, they haven't corrected this yet. They said as well, according to law enforcement, a bullet hit a teleprompter and he was grazed by glass shards, making it seem less bad than it was. The problem with this is that it's completely false. Here is the Secret Service agents. They've just gotten on top of Trump. His ears already think, look, there's his two teleprompters, including especially the one to the far side over there on his right, your left. Looks completely intact to me. But more to the point, magically, there happened to have been a New York Times reporter with a very, very specialized camera that was shooting with a 1/8,000th shutter speed, perfect lighting. Even caught the bullet trace in that first image very famously. And then here is Trump with his hands up. There's no sparkly shards in the air. That camera would have caught sparkly shards, because if it shattered the teleprompter, it didn't like cause one piece to magically gyrate and go and hit his ear. It would have gone boom like this, right? And there would be sparkly shards everywhere. So this is an easily disproven thing, but they're still going with it. And that tells you when they start putting stuff out like this, here's the deal. This is information that's designed to confuse. So they'll put out complete garbage junk and you have to spend time trying to process it or make sense of it. Or your friend will say, oh yeah, but he was just hit by shards from a teleprompter. And you're like, no, I don't think so. That's what it's designed to do. Trip you up. So this is like trying to run through a thicket of alder in Maine with a backpack on. It's like, it's getting caught on everything. Can't do it. So every time you see somebody put forward the teleprompter thing, that means they are an agent of disinformation. Every time you see them try and confuse what's known facts at this point, they are attempting to purposely, because they've had plenty of time to figure out what's right and wrong and true from false, that if they go with falsehoods long after truth has already been established, then they are purposely, intentionally working towards confusion, not truth. Okay? And why would they be doing that? Now, this is kind of interesting. So here we are. There's just really a lot of open glaring questions. So this is on July 17th, CBS News. CBS, ABC, NBC, all starting to ask real questions about what's going on here. And that's opening a narrative window, which means that we have a lot of opportunity to reach a lot more people with this, because this is obviously a bunch of junk. So, but this is how the deep state rolls, right? They do something, they create an incident, and then they completely gaslight us, right? Like simple, logical, take a deep breath, common sense should be easy to dispel, right? Steel frame buildings don't fall at free fall speed for 2.25 seconds due to office fires. It's like simple common sense stuff, right? So here we have questions, right? They say an investigation is continuing. We'll see what happens. They say the gunman's motive, but I'm going to have to say the alleged gunman's motive, because nobody has proven that that rifle fired from that position caused these bullets to land in these spots, including in somebody's head, somebody's chest, somebody else's chest, and at least one hydraulic line. So they say down here, quote, the U.S. Secret Service is facing mounting questions about the security flaws that allowed the alleged shooter, I'm going to put alleged back in there, to fire from a rooftop, allegedly, near the rally, allegedly. But you can see they're starting to circle up a little bit. They're going to call this, questions about the security flaws. They aren't security flaws. Okay, so here's the thing. We have some open, glaring questions. These are my questions. This is what I'm going to be seeking to resolve over the next coming days, weeks. I still can't find out who was the special agent in charge that day. This should be well known. This should be very easy. I should be able to look at their background, look at their service record, try and find out who they've donated money to, find out if they have any social media presence where they've actively said things that were anti-Trump, stuff like that, right? So, because we have questions, obviously. So who was the SAIC? We do not know that. And that's a bizarre thing to me. We should know. And we should probably know everybody in that security detail. And we should know these things. We have nothing about that. Second bullet point, why does audio analysis clearly indicate that a second shooter is on presence, right? Yet there's no discussion about this possibility yet in the MSM or in the FBI statements. I think we all know why. This is a very uncomfortable thing to the lone shooter with no known motive story that they're going to run with, which is the old story. You always run with that one, right? Patsy. It's like this guy, this Crooks guy, came right out of Patsy Central Casting, right? Perfect, right? And all the questions like, how did he get to that spot with all those things, with people noticing yet nobody interfering, et cetera. It's a stupid story. So here's the thing. When they put on inside events like this, sometimes they get sloppy. In this case, they were extremely sloppy, really, really sloppy, stupid sloppy. Okay. And by the way, if I can perform the audio analysis, and this is this is still for my subscribers. I'll come out with this as soon as it's solidified. I have actual people with real software and experts working on full analysis. We're going to take a look at this, but it's very clear that, and even CNN had observed and other people had observed that two experts looking at the audio, media forensics and also audio expert and analyzers, that they'd said, wow, there were 3 weapons fired that day, right? The first 3 shots, then there were another 5 shots. I think there were only 4, but there could have been 5. I don't know. Maybe I have different audio recordings. And then there was 1 more shot. Okay, so if 3 plus 5 plus 1, all of those groupings from different weapons. So we have questions. Who was shooting those second sets? Because the time signature between the time of the shot and the arrival of the report, so the shot comes through and it's the supersonic crack of the bullet, was recorded by a microphone that was right in front of Trump's podium. So we hear the supersonic crack, and then we hear the report, which tells us that whoever was shooting, that bullet came by that microphone, and then the gun went off. The gun report was recorded. So this wasn't somebody, one of those 2 sniper teams nearby shooting back. So we already know that. It's established fact. Now we're going to analyze this more completely to discover how far away were these. We have to make some guesses and some assumptions. I think we're going to have to widen the security perimeter out beyond 140 yards. We're going to have to go include other buildings and start taking a look more widely, and we'll do that. Hey, why no discussion of the water tower or other more distant sites? It's only the most obvious place, right? Why? Why no photos of the spent brass from the alleged shooter's position, right? That's the first thing. I mean, I've seen pictures now leaked out of his cell phone darkened and a remote control with a battery taken out, and a battery. I mean, that's it. But why no pictures of the brass? And And why do they hose it down right away? I mean, just anyway, how come there's been no accounting of the bullet trajectories and the known strikes and the injuries? We should be able to trace all of these. These will tell us a lot about the crime scene and what actually happened. This is rapidly being lost to time. And I think that's part of the cover-up. Also, why no obvious accounting of all the shots taken? 8, maybe 9, maybe more. We can't rule out suppressed and subsonic fire either. We don't know. But for sure, we need to understand these things. And then finally, and this is what I'm going to talk about in part 2 for my subscribers, because I got to get my arms around this a little bit more. But it turns out a whole boatload of short positions were taken out on Donald Trump's Truth Social Media stock in the week prior to the shooting. And I mean a boatload. So that means potentially that somebody with insider knowledge had a lot of information and had enough information that they were able to place millions of short trade equivalents on Donald's stock price. And that, my friends, is not the work of a lone, deranged 20-year-old. That's what I have for you today. For my subscribers, follow me back. We got a lot more to talk about. All right, until then, till tomorrow, until whenever I see y'all next, please keep your head on a swivel and capture everything. Please send it to me if you think it's something I need to see. All right, bye for now.